All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Bottom Line Podcast, where we say what we mean and we mean what we say, because at the core of everything that is, was, and forever will be, there will always be the bottom line. Today, I've got two heavy hitters with me, and they're not holding back. These guys are social media influencers at a very high level, from the way I see it, anyways, from my perspective. So thanks, you guys, for taking the time. Kira Day out of Toronto, Canada, and Miss Katie Wallace out of Dallas, Texas. Two guys that I follow a lot, actually, because it's real, right? Like I like watching you guys' content, and I like watching you guys talk about real stuff, like passion, which is what I want to get in the bottom of, like, right? Because my whole thing is like geared around desire. And when I saw you guys talking about passion, I was like, oh, those two are almost really synonymous, desire and passion, right? And I don't want to make them like one word, because they are two different things, desire and passion. And then both of them, if you work towards one, you will get the other, but then both can lead you to fulfillment, right? And that might sound a little crazy. So I've got a pro here, Kira, and another pro, Katie, to break that down for us. Let's talk a little bit about that, right? How'd you guys?
Protege. I'm
Yeah,
the protege.
protege.
Okay. Yeah. Kira's the pro. I'm like her little, like, minion.
Gotcha. Okay. How'd you guys even meet?
Holds her own. Katie holds her own in so many ways. Yeah, that's an awesome question, and I love this because I've been playing around with the inner stuff for like 4 years now,
Yeah.
and Katie for a lot longer than that. So we got a lot to bring to the table in this conversation. And I like breaking down distinctions between passion and other things, right? So like passion, ambition, and all of these things that it's almost like there's similar flavors, but there's very different distinctions for each. So when it comes to desire, it's almost like they're brother and sister, right? So desire is like something the way that I see it, it's something you want. You deeply want to get to. It's this goal or this dream or this thing that stimulates you. And to bring passion from up here all the way down here, we've created kind of a formula for it. So passion is meaning times investment, right? So it's doing the things you find meaningful. Whereas with desire, I feel like it's meaning times thought, right? So it's putting and thinking into this thing that you want. And what's interesting about it is they both can lead to each other, right? So you can have a desire for passion,
Right.
and you have passionate desire, right? Just the interwovenness of those inner feelings, but the distinction is in the investment. So once you actually desire something and you start doing or putting the implemental steps in place to get to that desire, that actually is the formula for passion. So yeah, that's I think how I would bring it down.
Yeah.
I love that. That was great, Kira. But like, this is so funny and so typical of you, because your question was, how did y'all meet? And you just like went into it. You were like, yeah, so I love what you're saying about passion and this. Like, let me just tell you.
Yeah.
I thought the question was like break desire and passion. Was that not it?
Well, yeah. So I think that's
It
gonna
could
be
be.
this is one of those things that we're gonna keep coming back to, because I could, like, all right. So like coaching is funny, right? Coaching is one of those things that you can't tell people what to do, or you probably shouldn't tell people what to do. You should try to figure out if they can tap into the desire or the passion to do that thing that can be their calling, right? Or their dream, right? You could think of any other like cheesy term you want to use, right? But it's that thing. So like being a coach is hard, because I can't tell people, well, I don't want to be a mentor. I don't want to be somebody that says, go do this. This is what worked for me. It's kind of like you got to really dial in. You got to really figure out where your true source of being is. You know what I mean? So when I see you guys talk, what I wonder is, besides like how did you meet, what keeps that synergy going, right? Because it's like you can have two people, and I've done this in the past, right? Like I've had people that I've worked with, people that I've clicked with, whether it's at the gym or like, maybe at a bar or whatever it is, And it's like that honeymoon period where you're like 3 months and you're like, it was cool in the beginning, but now they're just annoying. You know what I mean? And I don't see that with you two. So it's kind of like there's whatever your desire is, whatever your passion is, it kind of like keeps you two kind of like you said, you form as one and become Voltron kind of. You know what I mean?
I feel like outside perspectives are always so interesting. You know how you hear how someone else perceives you and the world. It's always so funny because usually you're not even thinking about it. You're just out in the world doing. Yeah. And so it's kind of interesting to hear that question just because I haven't really thought about that. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I think I'll just speak sort of from my experience. I think because we met back in 2017, which is like the golden, and it was because of LinkedIn, sort of the golden years of LinkedIn before everyone was on LinkedIn selling shit about LinkedIn or selling stuff about LinkedIn. Sorry, I don't know if we can curse here.
Yeah, you be yourself, Katie. Be you, Katie.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Sometimes constraints are helpful, sometimes they're not. But yeah, so we met then and we were talking not about similar things, but we were talking about the things that we were passionate about. And it's funny that what Kira's passionate about is passion. And we were just really, I think even more than that, we were just very aligned with how we wanted to show up in the world and how we wanted to serve others. Yeah. And I kind of think that has been that's been bigger than anything as I'm thinking about it right now. I don't know like what your perspective on that is, Kira.
No, I think that you nailed it. Actually, it's interesting because like back in the heyday of LinkedIn or when it first kind of generated, we were a couple of the earlier adopters to the video because video came on late. It was late to the game with all of the other social channels. Yeah. And I remember the very first video I saw of Katie, and it was like, there were all of these campaigns to try to get people on, right? So those are the like, Let's Get Honest campaign. I think you did like the Millennial Minute. Okay. That was the one that I was like, I saw this girl and I was like, oh damn, her vibe is like legit. I'm like, I need to get into contact with this one. And just because like, you know, earlier content creators, I don't even know if I could call myself, I don't even classify myself as that.
I'll do it for you. You're a content creator.
But like back in the day, it was just like we were all just not knowing, you know, just trying to find our place and trying to find our voice and things like that. And I think you're right, Katie. Like I think that it's the bigger mission, it's the bigger vision that we're so aligned with, and just what we want to see in the world, and the way that we kind of aspire humanity to behave is like those are the things that can keep us talking the whole way through. Yeah. That's what started the initial spark, right? Like the desire to get to know this other human that had, you know, so much of the same ideals that I had, and just those like, just kind of like, you know, working through that real stuff. And I think friendship and that friendship is just invaluable to me. So yeah, it's just,
Yeah. So when I listen to you guys talk, here's the other thing, right? I see Katie as desire, and I see you, Kira, as passion, right? Because as I've been following your guys' journey, like here's the thing that you don't know, and and I'm not a stalker, I promise, right? I just been on LinkedIn for a really long time, right? Okay. I remember
exactly what a stalker would say, but okay.
Yeah. Only on Mondays and Fridays, but on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm not stalking.
Perfect. Right? But glad we caught you on a Thursday.
I saw you on the Unlearn show. That's something that was like brand new, right? And I wasn't really thinking about video content just yet. I was more thinking about text, right? And just posting pictures, you know? And I saw you doing that, the Unlearn show. And then I saw Kira, I think you were doing, you were talking about passion. You're always talking about passion, right? And so a lot of times what's confusing for me is like when people put up a picture and then they like put up text behind the picture and they never say anything. So you don't really know what this person is like. You know if they have personality, you know if this is all fluff, you don't know anything. So when you start to see video, you get this idea of like, oh, this person is real. They believe in what they're actually writing and they have some personality, right? It's not scripted. So that's what makes you guys stand out, right? So like what I'm wondering too, okay, with this whole passion thing, Katie, you've been through a few different journeys, right? You started the Unlearn show, and then you went into like this whole sustainable energy period. And I think I don't know if you're still doing that, but with that, you are educating. And I was like, who's Katie? Like, I know now she does, this energy thing, but I didn't know who you were. And then you got to a whole other level where you started becoming like a person, and you started sharing like your story and your journey. And I was like, oh, this level of vulnerability, I don't know if I could ever do that. You were super vulnerable on social. And I was like, what is that? Right. So it drew me in. Like, so my question to you is like, okay, what made you actually do that? Like, what gave you the guts to do that? Right. What
Yeah.
made you want to share that side of your story?
I think there's quite a few things. And I think what's so interesting about writing and about creating videos, specifically on LinkedIn, because this is the only place that I do it. I mean, I write like other places, but I'm particularly vulnerable on LinkedIn, is that you're going on a journey with me. I'm learning every single day. I'm growing every single day. I'm evolving. Mm-hmm. And so you've seen sort of the real-time evolution of me, because I went from this person who was actually obsessed with the idea of the environment and saving the planet and getting people just to get on board. And what's so cool about going down that rabbit hole and being really passionate, and I'm still, to be clear, I'm very passionate about that. But as I was working with companies and just going out into the world and doing this work, I recognized that we had a much bigger problem. Mm-hmm. And the problem was us. And I recognized that I was part of the problem. And I saw that this wasn't the root, like this was not the root of the issue. And if we were ever going to make any sort of substantial change, it was going to have to start with us and evolving how we show up in the world, or else we will just continue to create messes that we'll have to continue to create or to create solutions for. And so I would rather go straight to the root. Or this is around the time that I went to Toronto to hang out with Kira. Mm-hmm. And we just went, and that was sort of around the time of this big shift that I had, because I had gone to the jungle and had this big revelation. I had this, I thought at the time it was my purpose, but I just was really, truly lacking clarity. And so I had this purpose snatched away from me in the jungle. Thank God, because I was going down, I was just wasting my time. I was going down the wrong rabbit hole. And then at that time met up with Kira, and that sort of started a whole other journey that I had to go on. Well, I was like still on it, still reeling from this jungle trek. And so that's kind of where it all started to shift for me. And I recognized that I had a lot of growth and healing that I had to do before I could effectively show up in the world. Yeah. And so a lot of healing, like physical and emotional and all of that went on. And then fast forward to 2020, last year, I reached a place where I was done with the bullshit. I was done with showing up in a way that everyone else wanted me to show up, and just decided to show up as me. And whoever stayed, great. And whoever left, bye. And that's kind of, so that's like the real, that's sort of what you've seen. And I think that's so, I don't know, it's just cool. It's like, cause it's been very definite, it's been very definite. So.
Yeah. And it's like, it's part of the journey. Like it's a journey that you feel like you're a part of. Like, I felt like I was a part of. Kira, what I'm wondering too is like for you, okay, so I don't know, like if you're watching Katie and you guys are like, following each other, and she's in Canada, she comes to visit. What do you see when you see Katie? Like, do you see somebody who's like, I don't know, like somebody who's like, oh, my sister from another mister kind of deal? Or do you see like a client? Do you see somebody who you like, how were you there for her when she came to Canada? How did you apply that? Because what she said was purpose, right? She talked about purpose. And then here you are with passion. I think a lot of people confuse that. They think they have a purpose, but they don't really find the passion in that purpose. That happens to a lot of people. So how did you deal with that?
So I think, Katie and I, before she came to Toronto, we were a part of a mastermind for about a year, right?
Okay.
So in communication, like weekly. I had some, a front row seat into all of the things Katie was going through from that point. So, I mean, by the time she got to Toronto, it was just very much like, okay, like what is this energy? How are we going to figure it out? And it was our first like face to face, right? So it was an exciting time. And, and when Katie, I don't see her as a client at all. I see her as tribe. Like if there's one word I can, but not tribe as in like, I don't know, human tribe. I know this is gonna sound like very esoteric, but like I feel her as like my like universal sister, you know, and like and just like we're kind of on this path where we're here to do work, right? And how do we collaborate our energy and our passions, our individual passions towards that work so that we can create a larger impact? And that's really where I feel purpose kind of comes in, right? So you truck along with passion, and passion is really like, it has so much more to do with you than anything else, right? It's like the journey of yourself and what you and how you want to show up and what you're attracted to. And like, I love what Katie said, right? Just getting rid of the stuff that just doesn't fit our DNA and like aligning to the things that do. Cause like, it's our river, it's our flow. Right. This is our, you know, the path to passion is really the path to finding yourself again. And then the purpose part is how do you take that love that you're developing, that connection that you're developing with who you are, and how do you expand that? Oh, I'm like breaking things. How do you expand that? I'm such a hand talker. That's a whole other story. But anyways, so how do you expand that and create impact, you know, on our home planet, you know? And I think that's the journey.
So
I just want to say, I was just going to say what is so great about Kira, and I think what attracts people to her, and like, even just like as far as clients, because like I think from the moment that Kira and I first talked, it was like, oh, cool. Yeah, your family, got it. Don't like really need to explore that any further. Like anything you ask of me, you got it.
Yeah.
But I think what was so cool about just because like we were friends, right? I didn't like, I knew about her work and I thought it was amazing, but like actually being able to dive into her work has been cool because it's given language to my experience. Right. Because where I would talk about things and I would just ramble on and on, she's like, cool, here's the science behind that. And here's like the way, like the terminology. And so I think that's what's so freaking cool.
Yeah. That's what got me stuck on your content, Kira. Like you are super like, you're a walking encyclopedia. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, and it's not like Google, right? Because like, Wikipedia, because you got to do work to get to the encyclopedia, right? You guys are probably around my age, right? I'm 37. So it's like, back in the day, you had A through Z, and you had to get, and sometimes some of the letters that have like H will have 2 books, and you got to, right? So it's like all this compartmentalization that you have to get through to really get to the source of what the root, like Katie's saying, right? Of what the problem is, so that you can really figure out if that's something you want to sit with, if that's something you want to accept, if that's something you want to work on, right? Before you can let go of those toxic people. I think one of the hardest things for me to do when it comes to what you guys have, this intuitive connection, is that detachment, right? Because on some level, you have to detach, right? And it gets really hard to do that when you're not with someone, you know, that you have that level of vulnerability with. And what's cool is that you're able to see that in each other. So then Katie felt safe with being vulnerable around you, right? And you also felt safe enough to say, well, I am a nerd. Let me break this down for you so you understand what's happening, right? How do you, okay, for me, when I go into coaching, what I struggle with is letting go of an outcome, right? I struggle with that because it's like, we worked so hard to get you to where you're at now. And if it fails, it's all right. It's all right. It's all about the journey. How do you deal with that?
I love that you brought that up, because it's almost like, and I was thinking about this, like reflecting on it the other day as well, where we all have our own stories and our own journeys. And it's like this, it's just diversity in and of itself, right? It's just like, it's so diverse, how many different outcomes and flavors that we can birth. But every human being bubbles up to the exact same lessons. And one of those lessons that we all got to learn is exactly that. How do you stay path on that journey, right?
Yeah.
But get completely completely removed from the outcome, just surrender to the outcome,
Right.
you know? And I think that we've been birthed into a culture where nobody likes that. It's a very like, it's almost like we're white fisting everything. We have a particular outcome we want. We have like, you know, the success dogmas. We have all of that stuff. And failure is such this like nasty, dirty word that nobody wants to experience.
Right.
And additionally, when you're a coach, you almost feel like you're responsible for this other person, right? And their growth. Like that's why you're here, right? So you're finding your own value in that. And, you know, what I've learned is that when we remove ourselves completely from the equation, right? And if we understand that that other person has their choices on the journey that they have to make for themselves, right? Then you can only really be there as a guide.
Right.
And no matter what they do, it's perfect for their own individual outcome.
Right.
And that detachment, it's almost like this, you've got to dismantle the ego in such a beautiful way for that to happen.
Yeah.
And that's a process and a half, right? Because like you have all of these scripts that are running continuously in the background going, you know, I don't want to fail this person. I don't want to let them down. I want to, like, this is my practice, right? Like I built this. And so you kind of want to be their hero in a way, but the only hero we can ever be is the hero to ourselves. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but the challenge is they're paying you. So there's this monetary transaction that's happening in the process, right? Which really brings this whole other dynamic up, right? But I think like it's about getting really comfortable and really expressive with the understanding that like it's within their power to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Right. You're gonna give them those pillars, those explanations, but we're not gonna disempower them by being the person to. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm wondering Katie, what are you thinking when you hear that? Like,
I'm just getting excited because this is like one of my favorite topics of conversation. And I have 2 points that cropped up. One of them, which will be the second point, I learned from Kira and just like being able to kind of go through her process. But the first one that I'm thinking of is sort of like Buddhism, right? The attachment, like the principle of non-attachment, and people see that as like not being attached to like people, places, and things.
right.
And it's not that. Like you can be attached to people, right? Like we have an attachment to each other, right? Like more than I would to a stranger on the street. But it's the whole idea of not being attached to outcomes. Like that's what they're talking about. And it's that like you can see that, or of course, you know, there's like more desirable outcomes. I want the thing that is going to like make me feel joy. Like I don't want the thing that's going to make me feel bad, but it's being able to see those two outcomes as fundamentally the same.
Yeah.
And that like you welcome either one because they are like what could happen. And so kind of how that applies to what Kira is talking about is like, and how like I'm kind of like wanting to move this forward for myself as well, is like you're creating a container. And that's what we do. You can create a container for people to have an experience, because then they can hit on the walls but then they kind of like, you're always like leading them back to this like realization, because like we need constraints. And this is something that I also learned from Seth Godin is like, you need constraints because that's where you have resistance, and you need resistance to learn the thing. And so the whole system is designed to give constraints to create resistance to get you to that realization. So that's all I was thinking.
That's deep. That's deep. I like that.
That's perfect. And that actually just like sparked another memory for me. Like when you read about, you know, therapists or psychotherapists and psychologists, that's also kind of what they're doing in another way, right? A human has to, in order for any transformation to happen, they have to have a new experience, right? And sometimes our brains become our own echo chambers. So we'll keep butting up against the same experience over and over and over because biology is about patterns, right? So that's a person in a vacuum by themselves, trying to do their life, their way, that kind of thing. You're never going to be what you can't see, and you're never going to know what you don't know. But like to Katie's point too, that container in all of these spheres, it's about helping someone have a new experience. And inside of that new experience, you're rewiring their conditioning.
Yep.
And that is what elevates growth and creates success no matter what.
Yep.
like there's this like underlying confidence that a person's journey is their journey and they're going to get to where they need to get.
Yep.
If you're holding on to an outcome for them, then you're not allowing them the space to get to that outcome on themselves. So it's a cool balance.
I love that. So I call that redesigning your default, right? That's what I say when I tell people we're going to help them redesign their default, what I help them do is like identify their baseline, right? And that baseline is going to be is reoccurring behavior that you're not really aware of, right? It's like that subconscious behavior. You keep pulling yourself towards those bad habits and you're like, it's one of my bad habits. What? It's a quirk, right? And you kind of own it and you're like, well, that's me, take me or leave me. You know what I mean? And we all have that. We all have that. Like you with the talking with the hands. I'm from New York, right? So like I talk with the hands too. And it's like, that's how I am, right? And in some places that's not good because you might knock something over or there might be a waiter walking by. And I've done that. There's been a waiter walking by and I'm really getting my point across. And the waiter is like, what? My bad. Here's a tip, right? So it's like, but I own it. So I know me, I probably shouldn't be doing that. What I'm wondering is, okay, and I got to be real here because it's hard for me to like relate to people if I'm not somehow meeting them where they're at, right? When you redesign your default, you create a new default, right? And it's usually something that you become aware of, consciously aware of, something that you decide you want to make this your new habit, right? What I'm wondering for you, Katie, when you decided you're going to detach, you're going to let go, you're going to replace or probably remove yourself from, I don't know, toxic people, toxic environments, things that weren't working for you. Were you thinking about, and if you were thinking about replacing them with something new, what was that for you? What were you letting go of? And then what were you replacing it with? And then how did that go?
Ooh, this is such a good question. We're just all on like the same wavelength. This is like my favorite topic of conversation. I know it's Kira's. So I think kind of for me, and I'll say sort of this last experience where I was getting signs from every which direction, and it was all of the above for me. I had to get rid of people. I had to get rid of I had to change my environment. I had to get rid of clients. I had to get rid of like the work that I was doing. So it was a full-scale burn down because I was having health issues. And I knew that it wasn't just from like some genetic thing. I knew it was like a component of how I was like, I think the biggest component was how I was living my life. And it was not in alignment with me. So I think at that time, I didn't really have a clear like picture of where I was going, but I knew that it wasn't here. So I was going to take the first step to get out of everything that I was in. So it was a full-scale burn down. It really was. Wow. And it was sort of like, I mean, I really had to, and this is like obviously very personal to me, I guess. But for me, it was had a lot to do with my mental health and unlocking some like traumatic things that had happened to me and navigating that before I could even get to the truth of who I was and where I was going. So it was the burn down. Then it was let's tend to my mental and emotional health because how I show up every day is the most important thing. And then came the insights into who I truly was and like being able to give myself time and space to just sit still and not have to be productive, not have to be anything, but just like, I didn't even try to figure out who I was. I just had to sit still and it became very clear.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is like, you were able to like get away from doing and focus on being. And in being, you were starting to find that inner Katie, right? That's something that I sit down with people with a lot. And it's like, yeah. And there's like a breakthrough moment for them. And it's hard to that's part of the dissociation and like detaching is like, we forget about being. We don't know how to be because we just want to do, right? But how do you do that as an entrepreneur though? Like, you got to pay your bills. You got to, do what you got to do. You're on LinkedIn, you're advertising, you're marketing. Like, how do you do that as an entrepreneur? How do you do it? Right? Like even Kira, like, how do you do that? How do you tell people to do that? Right? So that they can find their passion. How do you do it?
I think it's a whole different operating system, right? So my backstory was that I was in corporate for 18 years. I was in like an aggressive sales culture for about 8 of those 18 years, where everything was doing, and your only value to the organization was what you bring in, right? So you are trained inside of that subculture to that your doing is your worth, your doing is your value. You're not important or valuable if you're not and performing and hyper performing. And what that does to the psyche is it completely dismantles who we are, because we're only looking at ourselves from that one lens, right? So sitting still used to be really hard for me. Like, it's an uncomfortable thing in the world. And I remember having anxiety, and I remember having a lot of like, the word I'm looking for, it was guilt. I think that's what it was. Around just sitting down and sitting still. I remember I was on my honeymoon, and we were in one of the most beautiful places on the planet. We're in like Positano, Italy, and I'm going through the path of the gods, and there's just gorgeous scenery all around. And Mark took a picture of me because I sat my ass down, busted out my phone, and I was answering work emails. That's the proudest moment. Like, he literally took my phone away from me, and he's like, no, we're not doing that. And I remember getting so angry at him. And then I had to sit with that, because I was like, what am I doing? Like, look at where I am, and this is what I choose to do. I was so detached from my being.
Yeah.
And I think, like, just like Katie, the burn down, we totally resonate. Like, we mirror each other in so many ways in our life journeys, because like, that's exactly what happened. I got sick. No shit. Like, that was a recipe for me to get there. And and I got super mad at myself when that happened. But then I also committed to learning. So the reason why I'm obsessed with getting to the root of things is because I knew that if I didn't get to the root of myself, then not only my health was compromised, but I didn't know what was going on. Like, I didn't know if death was going to be the outcome. I didn't know if, like, right? So that really makes you confront yourself in a really serious, because you realize that, like, and I know that it's so simple and it's so obvious, but when you're stuck in this space of go, go, go and do, you forget that life is not this permanent thing. It can be taken away from you, right? So, you know, getting real with myself in that perspective and in that moment made me realize that I wasn't functioning in the right operating system, and I needed to design a new one.
Yeah.
But I have a way to do that, because I couldn't see what that new operating system was. And it was like literally like hundreds of modalities I must have gone through, and a lot of money later. And I really fundamentally started to redefine my value systems, right? Because you behave based on what you value.
Yeah.
So if my new value system was around enriching this being that I had, this is the thing that I tell all of my clients and me. I'm like, just by breathing, I'm good enough. Just by breathing, I've got value. Just by breathing. Everything else is the bonus.
Yeah.
So yes, there's an entrepreneurship cycle. Yes, I have work to do. Yes, there are things that have to get done. And I have to ensure that my health comes number one. Like, I ensure that I'm breaking out pockets in a day where I'm literally doing nothing, but that's it. I'm loving myself for just breathing.
Love that.
Right? Like, and inside of that, I find, because there's always these polarity paradoxes, right? You must slow down in order to speed up. It sounds very oxymoronic, but I only found my growth and my expansion and my business only started doing well when I really, really disciplined myself enough to say, I'm going to pace myself, and this is going to be slow. I'm not going to be buying into the dogma. Either way, this is my journey. This is a life game, right? And like, it's the same thing, because Katie knows, right? Inside of the business, there's so much that we're doing, and there's so much that we're ramping up for. But fuck, like, we need our weekends, and we need to really kind of like mentally check out. And sometimes Katie needs to put some serious boundaries up and be like, Kira, I'm done. Right? And I got to respect that, you know, like, it's really about that dance and knowing what is important and never forgetting that in the mix of it all.
So then, okay, so like, here's the thing I'm hearing you say too, is like, A lot of people, and this is my world, right? My world is like high driven, high sales, high performance, hyper productivity. I know you can. We're hitting 10x rules, 10x goals, right? Hyper, hyper, hyper. And let's get it, get it, get it. Like it's fast paced. And if you're not keeping up, then you're keeping out, right? And those are the kind of guys that I coach, you know what I mean? And it's like they're sales leaders, they're sales managers, they're driven. And what they do is their identity, super alpha, both male and female, right? Alpha, 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 all the way. So they identify, a lot of them, if they are not yet alpha, they become alpha through their achievements, through their productivity, through their performance, right? And they start to realize, oh, I'm the shit, right? Like that happens. So what they do is they identify their passion as who they are. They identify their job as their passion. So the disconnect now is like me, I went through this. It was hard for me my first 5 years to even take my daughter when she was like, what am I going to say, like maybe 18 months, almost 2. It was hard for me to take her to the park and push her on the swing because I had to get money, I had to get paid. And that's what I'm supposed to do as a father, as a husband, as a leader, right? Okay, so like 3 years later and a divorce later, I make time for that. You know what I mean? And all the money in the world doesn't really mean as much as my time with my kids, right? That's something that I had to learn the hard way through divorce. But now it sounds a little bit hypocritical when you tell somebody who's a high achiever, somebody who's, they came from the ground up, they bootstrapped it, they had no support, that they have to disconnect now from what they built to go into that mode or that family mode, right? So where now is the passion?
So the thing about this, right, and this is really, really, really important, and I'm so happy that you're touching on this because, like, I hear you. I was the national sales manager for Samsung Electronics, a Korean company, where all it is about like getting it done. And I'm like literally answering emails at 4 a.m. And yeah, I was wearing a badge of honor, 100%. I'm not like, or I never identified with being alpha or type A until I hit sales. And all of a sudden, it's like Kira was like Kira full stream.
Yeah.
And I was very respected and I got those promotions and I got all of that stuff. And there was a lot of praise around that. And that still hurt me negatively, right? There in life, you can't get away from it. Balance is essential, right? So from a passion perspective, and I learned this the hard way as well, there's two sides to passion, right? There's a harmonious side and there's an obsessive side, right? So, and I mean, this is like Dr. Robert Bellarend, and there's a whole bunch of science around this too. And I know that I fall in the obsessive. And when you're in a sales high performance culture, the entire culture is driving you to be obsessively passionate, right? Yeah. Why? Because at the end of the day, you need to hit those revenues, you need to hit those markers, you need to really kind of like keep growing. It's hustle, hustle, hustle.
Right.
And if you believe that at the end of this, you're gonna die really happy about all of that money you just made and right. What you did, kudos to you. Keep doing that. But if you think that one day you're gonna die and maybe you may feel like you missed out on other things, well, now is the time to start doing that and integrating it, right? So I don't believe in like life-work balance at all. I think that's it's all about integration. I can be as passionate about my family as I am about my work. I really can. And if I'm not as passionate about my family as my work, then I shouldn't have a family, right?
Yeah.
Right? If one day my work becomes more important than my husband, I shouldn't have a husband.
Yeah.
I don't deserve it.
Yeah.
Straight up.
Yeah. You're right. That's how I felt after.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, she's right. You're on the money. Go ahead.
No. I was going to say, yeah, it sounds like with so many people, and I think we've all experienced, but it's like a lack of clarity about the type of life we want to live today. because so many people now, like Kira's talking about, are working. I just need to work really hard for 5 years.
Yep.
And then in 5 years, it's going to be super cool. I'll be able to love my family. I'll be able to like show up and do. No, friend, that's the type of life that you want to live, you need to do that every day.
Right.
That's everyday stuff. That's not, don't like put it off because, I mean, you could die before then. What's the point? What is the point?
Yeah.
And so I think it just comes back to, number one, clarity. You have to get very clear on the type of life that you're living. Like for me, I want to have fun and I want to work with people that I love, that are like impact driven, that are mission driven, just like I am.
Yeah.
And like, if I can do that, then great.
Yeah.
And then it comes back to structure. Like you have to have structure. And a lot of people are like, I don't want to structure my day because like this and that. But I mean, structure it down to the like, cool, I know I'm meditating for 25 minutes at this time, like I'm working out. This is my writing time. This is when I read articles. This is when I do work for the Passion Center. This is when I do work for this, like, you know what I mean?
Right.
You have to just get very like, and then this is my walk. This is when I go for a walk because I'm probably going to be a little fuzzy.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's like, you kind of create balance by creating your own constraints and container for your day.
Yeah. So that's your thing, huh? Constraints and containers. That's going to be your thing.
That's my thing for the week. I get really obsessive about ideas and then I implement them. And then it becomes like, that becomes like a new, like part of my operating system. So yes, I'm going to keep saying it over and over because I have to remember that one is very key right now.
So I like that because I tell people to create an anchor, right? To break that pattern of thinking. And so when they go into that pattern of thinking, that old pattern of thinking, they go back into their old selves, right? And that old self is like something that they pull from their childhood usually, right? Or their own limited beliefs. So what you have with the container and the constraints is that's an anchor, right? How did you come up with that? Besides Seth Godin, you probably took the words, but there's a concept there that resonated with you. What is it about the concept that resonates with you?
Well, I just think about it, and well, how it really started was when I went and had an ayahuasca journey
You too,
in the
huh?
jungle, and you too, huh? To join the club. Did you?
No, but I've heard a lot of people talk about it. I'm like, I'm not doing that.
Okay, well, so if anyone's ever experienced it or heard about it, like it's very important within that experience that you have a container. Or else you will just split yourself into a billion pieces and you'll be all over and you'll come back and nothing will make sense. But that's kind of what life is like too. If you don't give yourself a container, you're just going to be you'll just be bouncing off the wall, no walls because you don't have any. So you'll just fly off into the ether and that's it. Right. And so in order, like you have to, this is a concept that Kira talks about a lot, is like microdosing change, right? Because we can't overwhelm ourselves with so much constantly. So that's why I pick one concept and I'm like, I like this. I want to integrate it. So this is the one that I'm going to make stick, and I'll work on it for a couple weeks and think about it and play with it. But yeah, I think that's kind of where it started, is like taking it from this one experience and then seeing how it applies in everything else that you do. Yeah. The need for a container.
Yeah, I love that. What do you think about your inner child? Are you in touch with your inner child? Both of you guys, like, are you guys in touch with your inner child? Like I think that's where passion comes from. I think it's that little, and you tell me, because you're the expert on passion, Kira. So like my idea of what passion is like, it comes from that inner child that's always just wanted to explore, the curiosity and just find that level of, I don't know if it's fulfillment, but there's like, when you're curious about something and you actually get that door open, it opens up other doors, right? So my inner child is like, I'm a Toys R Us kid. You know what I mean? Never want to grow up, you know? How's your inner child? Like, are you still in touch with your inner child, or is that something you forgot about?
No, it's definitely a very important part of the work. I actually have a full program called Unblocked, and I don't use the word inner child because sometimes people who aren't used to the terminology can get freaked out about it, right? So we structure it in a different way so we can do the work without the language getting in the way. But yeah, like I've done a lot of inner child work, and I've also had a lot of like childhood traumas, which interestingly enough was why I picked sales as the thing, right? So it's also very interesting, the job and the professions that we end up embodying when we have unresolved things, right? But we don't know because it's all unconscious and we don't think about it. We don't have the language to even form a baseline for us to explore it more. When I got sick, I went all there. Like that was definitely one of the stuff that came up. And my inner child threw a lot of tantrums and was sabotaging a lot of shit for me, right?
Yeah, me and you both.
The whole world. we had a president that was one giant tantrum. Sorry, keep going.
Low blow, Katie. Low blow.
Yes. So I really just needed to like sit with her and stuff. And you spoke a little bit about curiosity, like what makes you curious. I think that depending on what your development process and who influence your development process, we have this idea that we're children and then all of a sudden we're an adult, right? And there's this separation and the child just goes away and now you're an adult. So you build these rules around what an adult looks like, feels like, does, whatever. My husband's very much like that. Like he's got this like box of like what an adult is. And sometimes he's like, you're not being an adult. And I'm like, tell me or project to me what your version of an adult looks like. I'm a perfect adult.
I don't want to be, right? Right now. Maybe later, but not right now, right?
Or I stop reframing the word adult, right? An adult can play. We are humans that think that we got to be this one thing, but we're so much wider and bigger than that.
Yeah.
And we're multifaceted, and we have all of these dimensions inside of our inner world that are constantly wanting expression and wanting to come out and wanting to like tell us things. And if we keep suppressing that or not looking at it or putting it away because we think we should be showing up in a certain way, then your passion is going to slim down, right? Like our passion is really about our expression, right? No one that can fake passion because it has to entirely be something that you like as an individual, right? And so if you're not experimenting with those things and going with the flow and like asking your inner child what the hell it wants that day and what kind of adventures it wants to go on and actually action that with something tangible, that you're missing out on the fullness of the experience of passion. Because passion isn't just one thing. Passion is an internal state of being that can only be experienced when you're actually interplaying with your outside world based on your internal requests, right?
Yeah. Multi-layered, right? The passion. Yeah. It's weird too for me because I'm like, when you think of my inner child, I still have like, I was a big Freudian kid in like college. So like my id, I want what I want when I want it. I see that in my kids. I see that in my daughter, especially. She's 6. And she is so persistent. And I'm like, that is a sales quality. Hold on to that. You know what I mean? And that's going to get you through life. Like never give up. Like she'll papa. And it's like 5-minute windows. And I'm like, but you got to give me a minute to get up and go like finish what I'm doing. But it's that persistence. You know what I mean? That's the it. And I have that. Right. And it's like, you mentioned the ego earlier. And I'm like, ooh, that's the hard part too, because sometimes we can like associate our ego with our passion and vice versa. And it continues to build itself up. And it's hard to remove your ego. And that's part of my inner child too, right? Because when I get through to somebody and I get them to really get through to a level where they're elevating, I'm like, oh, I just got him in touch with his ego. He doesn't even know what he's going to do with that yet, because it's going to build. And I feel like I should pull away from that because that's my weak point, right? I got to like check myself when it comes to my ego because sometimes it's not about me. I got to let go. I gotta, you know what I mean? I gotta detach from it. And it's hard for us to do that as people, but there it goes again. That's my inner child.
The thing too, though, is that ego is not always bad, right? Like ego can be very, very good.
Yeah.
It's our relationship with it that can be bad.
Yeah.
And also like the awareness of it, when we're not aware, that's when we let it run the show. And when it's so, and we're not aware of it, that's where toxic stuff starts happening, right? So the practice is awareness. And then the management of like where it comes in to play and where it doesn't come into play. Because when we're in the driver's seat, we're good.
Right.
The danger stuff happens when we give the driver's seat to something else, right?
Sure. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. You're nodding over there, Katie. What are you thinking?
No, I mean, I was just thinking about the ego and someone that I had on my podcast a while ago. Her name's Catherine Sherlock. She's really amazing, but she was like, I would love to see a world where we stop talking about our ego like it's this, monster, this horrible thing that we need to contain, because it's so much a part of us. And when it crops up, like we shouldn't like shun it away. We should, because you start to feel resistance. And this is like a practice that anyone can do. It's like if you're having a conversation with someone or if you're doing something and you start to feel that resistance, like that's what you go into. And you're like, oh, okay, you don't react from that place, but you're like, why am I feeling resistance? Where is this coming from? And usually you're right, it's pointing back to something. And the ego is trying to protect itself because we have this identity, we have this picture of who we are in our heads. And everybody has it, And so when that comes under attack from, someone's telling us something about ourselves and we don't perceive ourselves that way, that's where we really need to look at it, because those are kind of our blind spots. So I think that was kind of what I was thinking about, but like also sort of, I feel the whole point of what we're doing here is in life in general, being a human, is to make a return to our true selves. Because we come here, I think, as our true self. And then from the moment that we are birthed out of the womb, we start, like, people start imprinting on us and start putting their views and their ideas of who we should be and what we should be. And so a lot of the process, once after we like get out of school and start to make our own way in the world, is to make that return to self. We're not like becoming a different person. We're just going back to who we came here as originally, so that we can fulfill that purpose. And I think that's why it's so important to talk about, your inner child or just your true self. Yeah.
Has anybody ever tried to like in any job that you've ever had, or any client that you've ever been with, any relationship that you've ever been with or in, has anybody ever tried to dim your light, right? Or has tried to make your passion, try to minimize your passion, right? You've obviously, Kira's like, yes, definitely experienced that. What was like that? What was that like for you? And then how did you deal with it?
So it's this one's, I don't talk about this one a lot, but it's happened to me with bosses inside of organizations that were threatened by my ambition or my work or whatever. Mm-hmm. And at the time, because I know so much now, I can go back and be like, okay, well, this is what happened. This is how it happened, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. But in the absence of knowing what I know now back then, I used to always get really frustrated, because I was like, how are they not seeing that I'm just trying to do what's best for the company? Like, why are they attacking me when I'm doing exactly what it is that they're wanting me to do, right? And I'm doing it well. So it just 1 + 1 didn't equal 2 in that scenario, right? And I think, what I learned in those experiences was that still you weren't allowed to shine as bright as you could if it meant that someone else felt, threatened. So I needed to learn how to minimize the brightness and how to work with tones inside of the organization, because they weren't even aware that was happening and coming up for them, right? Because they're all going through their own pains and they're all seeing the world through that lens, right? Yep. So, but I remember that being so restricting, and I remember that actually killed my passion in many circumstances. So instead of me being able to do and perform in a way that was benefiting the company, it was like counterproductive, right? We were doing something to hinder my growth and my performance, yet would blame me when it didn't work. It was like the most ridiculous set of circumstances. And that's actually, that drove a passion. Like, one of the reasons why I wanted to design the Passion Center was I wanted to create a new system, because that model was just not working for me. And I was a high performer. And I saw other high performers have to leave organizations because they weren't being, respected, and they weren't being allowed to just do the work.
Right.
Because of kind of political means, right? And what I started to realize was that the organization is just a social structure, right? Just like every other social structure. And when there's toxicity inside of a social structure, or when there are people that are dealing with pains, or not able to deal with their pains, I guess is a better way of putting it, it's going to bring down the environment and everything else, right? So I don't know if that answered your question, but that was my...
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. What about you, Katie?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I could give you any number of examples of even just like from the very beginning wanting to start my own company, and before, like, multiple years before I ever did it. I mean, I ended up having to, like, in my marriage, I'm not going to say that was the only reason. There were so many other reasons, but I mean, that was a big factor in that I knew that I could live a different type of life. And it was it was just constantly drilled into me to know there's like a particular path, and you take that path, and that's it. And so, I mean, it kind of like, and you just going back to sort of the more unhealed parts of myself or ourselves, I think that, like, that's kind of what gave me the entrepreneur edge, is like, screw it, I'm gonna do it my way anyway. Like what's his name from Patagonia, who founded Patagonia, was Yvon Chouinard. He's like, if you want to learn something about the entrepreneur, look to the juvenile delinquent, because like that we're always trying to do things our way. So yeah, but it kind of did it. Like we need that friction. Like we need that to push up against, because, or else, like, why does it matter? Why is it so important? And that friction shows us why. Yeah.
So what you both just said, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just applauding that statement and just saying that is so perfectly said, because like we're all scared of that tension. And when we're going through it, of course, it doesn't look pretty. But if you don't have that tension, you don't develop passion. I would not be where I am without all of those stuff, because it forces you to think about things deeper when you have pain, right? It's an awareness tool. If you don't have it, you can't ever get to that deep place where you're like questioning things and you really want to change things, and that desire to really move into a passion.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you were able to like break that down, because both of you said the same thing. It's like when people in both situations try to dim your lights, what you guys did was shine even brighter, and you found a way to get out of that situation so you could shine even brighter, right? So it's like, you're not going to allow anybody or any circumstance to dim your light. It's just not going to happen. It's not in your makeup, right? And that's okay, right? And when I get to that place, I play Frank Sinatra's. It's funny that you said that, do it your way, because I play that still. Like and I think about my son, right? Because I watch him do his math, right? And him and I, like, we don't vibe when it comes to math, right? Because he's in his own, the school teaches them, the way they want him to learn it. And I'm like, yo, you could do this like in like 2 steps, right? He's like, no, but this is what the class is doing. And I'm like, okay, we need to get this thing individualized, right? And that's just me thinking. And I'm like, all right, let me not put that onto him. You wanted to be a good class participant. But I feel like at 8 years old, he's being put in a position where he has to dim his light. And so I watch him outperform kids in the playground. I watch him outperform kids around just being a kid. And I'm so proud to see that. But then I see it happening to adults too, just like how you mentioned, in a corporate environment or in a relationship. And it's something that it seems like we can't really escape, but it's good to know that you can actually break out of it and then go shine your light somewhere else.
It's painful. It's painful as hell, because nobody will break up from their social environment. We're wired to want to belong and to want to fit in and to want people to like love us and all of that. But there comes a point where you're like, hey, people aren't going to love me anyway, so why don't I just be myself? Right?
Yeah, love yourself.
But to your point, I love that you brought up about your son and about school, because there's this poet, Robert Blythe, and he wrote this book, the Little Book of the Human Shadow. And he talks about how kids, and you mentioned this earlier too, Katie, it talks about how kids at like 3 years old or 2 years old, 3 years old, they shine their light in their brightest, and it's like in 360 degrees, and like all you see is this vibrancy, and they don't know no, they don't know what's right, they don't know what's wrong, they're just themselves, right? Until they're told no, or until they get in trouble for being just themselves.
Right.
They start to learn, and then they start being conditioned that there are things about me that's not right. So they take those pieces and they put it in what he describes as being this invisible bag, right? And then like they go to school and the same thing happens, right? So the school teacher to the school kids are all kind of conditioning them to be who they, or projections of what they think is acceptable or normal. So all of the things that falls outside of that, which is still true to us, we're learning how to take it and put it into that invisible bag.
Right.
And that continues throughout our lives until we're way older. And then we basically like flip the bird to society and we try to find our bag, and then we try to like take all of our pieces back. Right.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's well put. What's the name of that book?
Book of the Human Shadow, Robert Bly.
Robert Bly, In Between the Shadows?
Little Book of the Human Shadow.
Little Book of the Human Shadow. Cool. I'm gonna look for that. Yeah.
If y'all haven't seen the movie Soul, which is like the new, have you seen it?
Yeah.
I feel like it's so applicable to like our conversation, and just it's such a good. I wasn't expecting that from Disney at all.
Me neither.
But yeah, it really blew me away. Kira, you would like it.
Well, since you put it out there, what was your favorite scene?
Oh my gosh. I mean, obviously the end scene. I mean, I'm sure you like I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but just sort of the part where he just sort of reviews his life, right? That part really got, I mean, I'm just over here bawling, like Lindley's just watching, my daughter is just watching the movie and I'm just bawling.
It was deep.
Yeah.
It was too deep for a kid. I'm like, what are they doing? Why are they putting this out for a kid? People are talking about dying over here. Like, we don't need that right now.
I don't know. I kind of am aligned with, I feel like death is so much a part of life that like, I feel like it's something that we do need to introduce kids to. So, you know.
Oh, I'm not ready for that yet. You're way more mature than me right now. You're way more mature than me right now. Yeah. You guys are amazing. So like, let me ask you a question, right? This is like, I don't want you to get like, take it the wrong way, but the worst time that you've ever had to like go through this self-discovery, and then you really looked at yourself and said, I hated this part of myself, right? And I see people do this a lot, right? Adults, a lot of successful adults, a lot of entrepreneurs, because what you mentioned, Kira, about the passion, right? And sometimes passion doesn't make any money, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's pure passion. The musician, the artist, the creative, right? And it's just like, this is my passion. The tattoo artist that doesn't have the shop just yet, right? And it's like, this is my passion. I like connecting with people, but I'm not making any money here. The actor, right? And they realize that there's a part of themselves that they actually hate, right? And it came from their passion. So they never go back to it again, even though it's something that can help them grow, right? For both of you, I think in your content, I've seen parts of you that I think that you're proud of who you've become, but there's parts of who you were that you let go that you probably, I don't know if it's the right word to say that you hated, but you didn't like as much, right? What was that for you? For you guys, like?
Which one?
Either one of you, both of you.
So for me, I think there's two things that you brought up there that I really think are important to share. So the first thing is the fact that passion doesn't equal money. So I think it's really important for us to, before I get into like my hate parts, but I think it's really important for us to understand that passion has been around longer than money. Let me say that again.
Wow.
Passion has been around longer than money.
Yeah.
Right? We have chosen to integrate the two because it fits our social structure today. Money is man-made, right? So we're trying to blend these two things, but they're very different things. And it just so happens that in our program, we found a model to blend those things, but that needed to be systemized because it's not inherently obvious for us to do.
Yeah.
And also, it's okay. Not all of our passions need to make us money. Sometimes making money with our passion actually takes our passion away, right? So it's a very delicate thing to, and it's very personal to the person too, right? Like I have lots of passions that I don't want to ever monetize. I don't. Like I love primates. That's one of my very obscure passions. I love primates. I learned so much about human nature because of primates. There's nothing that I would ever want. I'm not going to go out and become a primatologist because of it.
Right.
It's not my only passion, right? I can be passionate about other things that can make me money, and I can volunteer and do stuff with primates on the side. Like, and I've worked with primate sanctuaries. I've volunteered at the Metro Toronto Zoo here in Toronto just because I need my primate fix, right? And I love it. So it's something I'm just going to naturally spend because it gives my life fulfillment and it increases my quality of life. So just to be really clear that there is a model to making passion the roots of your money. Yeah. But all of your passions doesn't have to make you money. So that's one. The second part is like you touched on something really important because I feel like I'm still trying to work through some parts where I don't quite like about myself. I think that that's just the human thing, right? The human process. Back in the day when I was in corporate, I think it brought out some really strong characteristics of my nature, but it also brought out some pretty bad characteristics of my nature. Like when I was in go mode and I wanted to get things done, I wasn't interested in like water cooler fucking conversations or talking about how your baby is or like
we got that in common.
Right? And I was laser. I was like, this is what I want done, get it done for me.
Right.
What we need to do, how are we going to get it done? And it rubbed people the wrong way, but I couldn't help it. I was like such a direct, targeted
tunnel vision.
Tunnel vision. Yeah. And I gotta say, like, I didn't love that part. I didn't love knowing that I didn't make or help someone feel heard or seen. I didn't love that. Now I'm over doing it on the other side, right? Because I'm like, I have the capacity to do that now, and that's how I want to show up. And I never want to go back or return. That's why I make someone feel like that. Like that's horrible for me, right? So that awareness that I think was something for me. There's lots more, but
yeah, I'll tell you mine. Right, mine is I'm never satisfied. I'm like never satisfied, right? And that's a big problem for me. I'm like, you just sometimes need to live in gratitude. It's hard to get into gratitude when you're never satisfied. When you always think you could do more. When you always think, oh, I could have done that better. And you become your harshest critic. I have that problem. That's one of the parts that I really, really like. And I have to share that with a lot of people because I'm like, it's okay. Know that about yourself and then improve on it little by little, chip away at it. But me, I can go to the gym. I can work out for maybe an hour, hour and a half, have small talk. And I'm like, I shouldn't have talked to anybody today. I should have just been in the zone, And my body will be sore the next day. And I'm like, no, wasn't good enough. You're bum. Look at you, you fat, lazy dad bod. Look at you. Right?
Man, we got to improve your self-talk.
That's what I grew up around. You know what I mean? So it's like, I'm never satisfied. And that's the part that I think I have to be able to like go back and say gratitude, be thankful that you got this far. You know what I mean?
Totally. It's like, that's a whole self-love thing for sure.
Yeah. And then I become Kanye and I love myself way too much. Right. What about you, Katie?
Oh my gosh. I was like, in my head, as y'all are both sharing yours, I'm like, come on, you can totally come up with something. And now as I'm thinking about it, it's like, I think one thing that really bothers me is that once I get to a particular place, I almost forget what it took to get there. And like, my life has been really dark in a lot of places. And it's almost as if like I take those experiences, or like I just forget about them, or not forget about them, but I just almost treat the person who experienced those, which is me. I treat her like a different person. Like I'm literally like referring to me as a her. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's an out of body experience for you.
Yeah. And it's
yourself like
almost
a better
like,
person.
yeah. And I think like a big piece is just not forgetting what it was like to go through those experiences and remembering to have compassion and empathy for people who are in that same spot. Because for me, it's like, oh, I got through it. You can't like, you'll figure it. And I don't show up like that, but sometimes in my head, like that's my automatic reaction. And I'm like, how unloving is that? Like, how unkind is that? Like, would you say that directly to yourself when you were going through that? And so I think that's a big piece, like a really, really big piece that I'm needing to look at.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for being so vulnerable. So just to like wrap things up, right? I'm wondering, what would you say to people if you were to leave them with like something they could take from this as far as their passion, pursuing their passion, living their passion? What would you leave people with?
So I think for anybody, just recognizing that passion is a very personal journey, right? And sometimes we can get, seduced into thinking that we have to make it look this one way, or it needs to be this one, or I should have found it already, or whatever the case might be, whatever story you have going on in your head. Just sit with it for a bit and be like, if this is a journey that I really want to commit to, and if I really want to go through, right? Self-discovery is the first place that you got to start, right? So committing to finding that is a commitment to yourself, and making the space to really honor that and like go deep within yourself. And I think that the first place, and sometimes, I mean, it's great to start off on your own. There's so many different ways that you can do this process. But if you want to go past the level where you're able to go, right? Because you're always going to butt up against yourself.
Yeah.
And if that's where you're going and you're stuck, don't be ashamed of that, no matter where you are. Even if you're like, because I work with a lot of successful people that are CEOs, lawyers, and you'd be surprised at how many people suffer in silence because they feel as though it's something they should already know, right? And they've created all of these accolades, so they're used to being perceived as someone who has it all together or like has all these things. Passion's a very vulnerable thing, so don't be afraid to reach out to a coach or someone who actually knows this process to be able to help you walk down that path, because it is the most exhilarating path you're going to go on. It's like, it's the hero's journey, right? Like this is stepping into your own hero's journey is really what it is about finding, discovering, or moving your passion forward in the world.
Love it.
So yeah.
Yeah, love it. And Miss Protege, I don't want to call you a protege because like I don't even want to call you a protege. I think you're super in tune with yourself, and it takes a lot of self-awareness to do that. So what's your some people could take away? What would you leave them with?
Mine's gonna be very similar to Kira's, which is start internal. I think, and granted, sometimes the way to get there is to start to fix things externally, and then you recognize, oh, that's not the move. But it's always going to start internally, because I feel like if you start external and you don't ever make it back to doing the internal work, you're eventually going to have to get there. So it could be 5-10 years that you get trapped in doing this external, and you're like, shit, I did the thing, I forgot I had it, and then you're going to have to go back anyway. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, yeah, just start internal, whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah, self-discovery. Love it. You guys are amazing. Where do people find you, Kira, Katie? Where do people find you?
I'm mostly on LinkedIn, but if you want to know more about the Passion Center, it's www.thepassioncenter, center spelled with an R-E, not an E-R,
the Canadian way.
It's hold on. I just want to clear up this debate. This is the world's way. The U.S. is the only place that spells it E-R.
No, because Americans are too cheap. Like Americans are just cheap, right? We drop letters because we don't want to pay for letters. We drop the U from favorite altogether.
No, we just want to be different. We just want to be different. That's why we're all so obnoxious sometimes.
Yeah. Passion.
Damn Americans. Sorry, I knew you were about to get it because I was like, oops, made that mistake last time with Kira.
It's the Passion Center.
with an R-E. LinkedIn, Kira Day, Insta, Facebook, all the regular social channels.
Okay. And Katie, where do people find you?
Get LinkedIn is my main place, but you can find me anywhere at Katie Wallace Hux, Hux.
Very nice.
My usernames on all the things.
Very nice. Thanks for taking the time, guys. You guys are amazing. Heavy hitters. Keep influencing. You're definitely inspiring me. I watch your content. So thanks for taking the time. Ladies and gentlemen, this was the Bottom Line Podcast, where we say what we mean and we mean what we say, because at the core of everything that is, was, and forever will be, there will always be the bottom line.